American exceptionalism is a complicated topic. It depends what you mean. It's invoked in a lot of different ways. There is a sense in which America is exceptional. It is the first nation born out of the Enlightenment. It is the first nation born out of an idea or ideas. Liberty, freedom, tyranny. America has become an exceptional nation through time. You could debate whether that's good or bad, right? That's not a historical question. But certainly, you would be crazy not to suggest that America has been an exceptional nation since 1776, and especially in the 20th century, into the 21st century. All the evidence is there. We're the world superpower. We have a level of freedom in this country, again, for good or bad, that is unprecedented. We have an industrial economy that has generated wealth beyond measure. That's exceptional.
The founders were right that they established a new kind of polity. They really did break with monarchy and generally with aristocracy. They really did establish a constitution which the former slave Frederick Douglass could call a glorious liberty document. And it was a constitution, along with the Declaration of Independence, which Martin Luther King would invoke from jail in Birmingham and from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and say, these freedoms are for everybody because every person is a person and is inherently dignified. And America's not exclusive, but it's unique in the sense that it got the ball rolling in a way that few other countries did. Were there other republics at the time? Yes. So when Lincoln, in his second letter to Congress, which is a kind of a precursor to the State of the Union address, he says, look, we have to win this war, the Civil War. And if we don't do it, then we're going to lose the last best hope. Well, people go, what? The last best hope? That's so arrogant. But what he meant by it, he looked around the world and he said, well, look at what we're seeing here. So the French Republic, and you could say that what happened in the French Revolution was the closest thing to a rival revolution, to the American Revolution. But the French were not faring very well. And they overreached. They were in our backyard. They were in Mexico. They were trying to dominate our Mexican neighbors, and that didn't go well. It would be shortly after the end of the Civil War that France would have to revert to its third republic in less than a century. So that it just didn't go very well. You looked at South America and the attempt at Republican or Democratic republics or constitutional republics. It's not going very well. There are very few places in the world where this attempt, this modern, very modern attempt at a government for the people, by the people, of the people, was being tried and being tried very successfully. And of course, we're in the middle of a civil war in the 1860s, so it wasn't going very well here either. But we did. The North did win the war. I say we, and we did recover the Union, and we did eradicate slavery. We're the first country in the history of the world to fight a civil war to end slavery. It didn't begin as a war to end slavery. Slavery was at the foundation of the war. There were other principal motivations, but it became a war to end slavery. And had it not taken on that moral imperative, I'm not sure we would have won the war. I'm not sure we would have, resolved the whole mess. So in that respect, it's very important that we did what we did. Slavery would continue in the Western Hemisphere up through the end of the 19th century. The percentage of Brazilians that were slaves was much higher than it was. Even though we had more slaves in the aggregate, the percentage of Americans who were slaves was not as high as the percentage of Brazilians who were slaves. That's not to say anything good about American slavery. That's just to say slavery was an enduring problem. Slavery has reared its ugly head again in the modern world. And people like the International Justice Mission say there are over 40 million slaves in the world today, mostly in Asia and Africa. Who are the leading opponents of slavery in the world? Mostly they're from liberal democracies like America. The leading legal principles and practices that are being applied in the fight against slavery, they're American. After World War II, America sent its chief constitutional theorist, Carl Friedrich, who was a great scholar at Harvard. Among other things, he oversaw Henry Kissinger's dissertation. But they sent Friedrich, who, of course, was fluent in German and knew German jurisprudence as well as any German did. And he helped them write the basic law of Germany. Think about that. Our greatest mortal enemy ever turned around and became an ally in no small measure because they adopted a constitutional form that was akin, not identical, but akin to ours. It was more continental than it was Anglo-American. But we had a hand in that. MacArthur and his team wrote, for all intents and purposes, wrote the Constitution of Japan. So in two places, a Nazi fascist regime and an imperial regime where the emperor was considered to be a god, those both ended, and they were our mortal enemies, and we helped them write the law. And they had become friends. They're long-term friends. And they haven't given the world difficulty, militarily since then. History's not over. And that's why the meaning of history is internal to it. It's not from beyond it. But there are an amazing set of stories that you can identify with America in terms of some of the things that it was a standard bearer for, namely liberal freedom, which continues today in the fight against slavery, and continues today because America continues to be a beacon to the poor all around the world who'd like to come here and live, because it's a great place to live. The opportunities here are pretty well unparalleled. So it is very much the case that America played a seminal role in the victories that we saw in World War II and the Cold War. And that's not negligible. That means world peace, world stability. That means an end to unprecedented suffering and carnage. The 20th century was the worst century in all of world history in terms of carnage. More people died in war than in any other century. There were more Christian martyrs in the 20th century than all the other centuries combined. And you can lay the responsibility at the feet of tyrannies and ideologies and movements of the cruelest form, all of whom were opposed by America. And it's not just that they were opposed by America, it's that America played a leading role in opposing them. And neither after World War II nor after the Cold War did America, the most powerful country in the world, absorb into its realm new territories. And so that the whole charge against America that we're an imperialist country is insupportable. We're not perfect, but you don't have to be perfect to be good. But you have to live by what is good. You have to live by principles that point to universal equality, universal freedom. And it's always the case that human freedom will mean that we move toward order or toward disorder. And in the aggregate, America has been a beacon for order, not for disorder. And the best, just glaring evidence of that lies in the century that just passed, the 20th century, where we clearly stood out from other countries as a place that could advance freedom as no other country advances it in the modern world. And that's a good thing in the aggregate. We have a lot of good that we still need to do.